Now, Ravens flock, after that dominating performance against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday, Lamar Jackson has completely run away with the MVP race. Now, initially, prior to this game, really prior to the past like 2 weeks, the people that, in my opinion, I felt were the front runners for MVP were like Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, Myles Garrett, and Daniil Hunter. But at the same time, obviously, people are more likely to lean towards quarterback for the award. It's basically like an unofficial quarterback award. And I've always had the stance that if we're going to just focus on the quarterbacks, no other quarterback this year had a more impressive season than Lamar, in my opinion. And this is what I was saying before, really, the last two games that we've just watched. Now, my opinion has gone a step further where, regardless of quarterback or non-quarterback, Lamar is head over heels, not only the best player in this team, but the best player in the NFL, and clearly the MVP frontrunner. But even though to many of us it's obvious what Lamar's value is, many NFL fans, as well as analysts such as Richard Sherman, have been saying that that Lamar doesn't deserve the MVP trophy this year. Many of them have been doing these mental gymnastics to try to convince themselves on why he doesn't deserve it and why this year isn't really that impressive. You have morons like that dumb bitch who said that he wasn't quarterbacky enough. Pardon my language, but there's no other way I could possibly describe it. I have to be blunt about this. Old girl said that he wasn't quarterbacky enough, as if Lamar doesn't have countless stats that go in his favor when it comes to passing and being a quarterback, both in high school, college, and the NFL. That was now when she said that, many people pointed out that there was a racial undertone to that, and I do agree. Now, mind you, I'm not a big fan of people pulling the race card. To be honest with you, I think a lot of times when people lean on that, I think a lot of times I think it's overblown, low key. But at the same time, there are scenarios where you do hear somebody who's speaking in a coded language, and clearly what she meant was she just didn't like the way Lamar Jackson looked, and she did not like the fact that a guy like Lamar Jackson, who isn't a white quarterback and isn't a biracial quarterback, the fact that he's just some random black guy with the country accent because he's from Florida, is out here playing at the highest level at a position that in her mind is supposed to look a certain way, and he doesn't look like that, and he is head over heels better than everybody that she likes who does look like that. But as far as, again, just to give some context on just how elite Lamar Jackson is, I'm gonna compare, like, let's take a look at Ben Roethlisberger. Let's take a look at where Ben Roethlisberger was at this stage of his career compared to where Lamar Jackson already is. So far, Lamar Jackson has been the starter in 77 games. And in those 77 games, he has won more than Ben Roethlisberger won at this stage of his career in his first 77 games. Lamar Jackson has literally, last week after the Niners game, he ironically enough had the same record after 76 games as Tom Brady. But not only will people not only will people say that Brady, not only will there be people that will never argue that Brady deserved the MVPs that he has gotten over the years. Obviously, you wouldn't hear somebody say he's not quarterbacky enough. But let's just keep going now. As far as passing touchdowns, Lamar Jackson has 125. Ben Roethlisberger at this stage of his career had about roughly 120. Lamar in that time span has only thrown 45 interceptions, whereas at this stage in Ben Roethlisberger's career, he threw over 70. And this is while Lamar has played in a much more difficult era in the NFL. I don't care what y'all say. This is part of the reason, not to get off topic, but this is part of the reason I always felt like Joe Flacco was a mid quarterback because, again, he was playing in an era where, yeah, many people will argue that it was tougher because of the hits and they weren't calling as many flags, but it wasn't tougher as far as the actual competition on the other side. Like, in that era of the mid to late 2000s, what quarterbacks were they really worried about in the AFC? Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Philip Rivers. That's pretty much it. These were the only people who were considered elite in the AFC for the most part. In the NFC, you have people like Drew Brees, but as far as the AFC is concerned, that's pretty much it. Right now, Lamar Jackson, and that's just talking about passing stats. If you throw in rushing stats, Lamar in his career at this stage already had 40 more touchdowns than what Ben Roethlisberger has at this stage of his career, and he's thrown 24 less over 20 less interceptions. And this is all while Lamar's doing this at the peak of the AFC. This is literally a golden era of quarterbacks and teams being elite in the AFC. Because if you ask anybody, if you ask a fan or an analyst or whoever who's the best quarterback or who's elite right now, most of the names they're gonna say are AFC quarterbacks. They're gonna probably say Mahomes or Burrow or Josh Allen or who knows, Trevor Lawrence, or they might say Justin Herbert, so on and so forth. And these are all guys just in the AFC. And Lamar has still been head over heels better than them. Meanwhile, Ben Roethlisberger was putting up those numbers that were inferior to Lamar back in the era where even though it was more intense as far as hits, he really didn't have to worry about outplaying this many elite quarterbacks. Like Lamar, every time you turn around, he's playing a guy who's considered either elite or having a career year at the quarterback position. But again, that's me going on a tangent. That's straying away too far from numbers. I got to obviously get back to the numbers. As far as what Lamar has done as a quarterback, passing the ball, as we all know, after this Miami Dolphins game, he has officially tied the NFL record for most games with a perfect passer rating. Lamar Jackson at 26 years old. We're not even in the prime of Lamar Jackson yet. Not even in the prime yet. We are just entering, we are just at the tip of the iceberg of what could be prime Lamar Jackson. And already at 26 years old, he already set the record for most wins by a quarterback before the age of 26. But also this year in this game, he tied the record for most games with a perfect passer rating with 3. He's tied with Tom Brady, Brett Favre, Kurt Warner, and Peyton Manning. That's what he did, but that's not something that should factor into an MVP vote. As far as to go furthermore into stats, the only stat that's really down this year for Lamar is touchdowns. People in the media, they keep saying Lamar's stats aren't there, the stats aren't there, the stats aren't there. They keep saying it as if it's plural, when in reality, it's really just, oh, his touchdowns are down this year. But as far as other numbers he's still doing just fine. He has over 3,600 passing yards, which is a career high. And he still managed, even in a year where he wasn't trying to run, he still managed to get over 800 rushing yards. Right now, Lamar Jackson is third amongst all quarterbacks in total yards right now with 4,499 yards. The only quarterbacks right now with more total yards than Lamar through these first 16 games is Tua Tagovailoa and Patrick Mahomes. That's literally it. But you let these people tell it, they're talking. I'm seeing idiots who want to repeat like a parrot. They want to repeat the talking points of these media people, and they're saying, "Oh, if Lamar won, this would be one of the worst statistical MVPs ever." Like, what are you even talking about? He's third in the NFL in total yards right now. How could it possibly be the worst statistical season for MVP? That makes zero sense. As a matter of fact, since everybody keeps wanting to compare this year to 2019, Lamar has more yards, total yards, and passing yards this year than he had in 2019. And he's most likely not even going to play the last game of the season against the Steelers because it's unnecessary. We already won the division and the conference. And it's on a short week after we just played a game on a short week. Playing him is unnecessary, and he already locked this up. Right now, when you look at Lamar's numbers, since people keep wanting to look at numbers and not watch the game, Lamar has a career high in completion percentage. And like I said a second ago, he also has a career high in passing yards. Right now, Lamar's fourth highest in the NFL when it comes to QBR, and he has the fifth highest passer rating in the NFL among quarterbacks. Technically, it's the fourth highest amongst quarterbacks because technically right now they have Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph listed as one, and he's only played like 3 games, so really he shouldn't even be eligible for this stat. But as far as every other quarterback who's played the majority of this season, he has the fourth highest passer rating and he has the fourth highest QBR. Uh, Like I said, he has the third highest total yards amongst all quarterbacks. He ranks fourth right now in the NFL when it comes to yards per pass at 8 yards per pass, which is a career high. And that's still while playing with the group of receivers that even though this is the best he has played with, this isn't like the best group of receivers in the NFL. This isn't a team loaded like the 49ers or the not the Steelers, the 49ers or the Eagles or the Cowboys. No, I'm not going to say the Cowboys. 49ers, Eagles, Dolphins. Like this isn't like our receiving room is better than previous years, but it's still not outperforming some of these other teams in the NFL, and still Lamar overachieves with whatever you give him. And context matters. The only reason Lamar's touchdowns are down this year is because once we get into the red zone, we just hand it off to Gus Edwards because Gus Edwards in the red zone has been automatic this year. Hence, Gus Edwards having 13 touchdowns this year, which is more than double his previous career high. That's not a coincidence. Lamar has been given the keys to this offense. You don't think Lamar, if he was really trying to be selfish and pad his stats, you don't think he couldn't have taken a bunch of those 13 touchdowns that Gus got and just kept it for himself? And instead of having 24 passing touchdowns and 5 rushing, he could have had 30. At the end of the day, part of what makes Lamar so dangerous at this point is because this is the first year where Lamar has had an opportunity to take a step back and play more of a game manager role, even though he is a game changer. And that's extremely dangerous. Again, that's the point Cam Newton was trying to make. There's only a few game changers in this league. Now, Cam, regardless of how you feel about him, regardless of how you feel about his outfits, he was a game changer. And he himself even admitted he wished at times in his career that he had taken a step back and trusted his teammates, been more of a game manager. Lamar learned from the mistakes of people like Cam Newton and did just that this year. And while he did that, he still managed to show that he could put on the cape whenever he wants. People keep saying that, oh, he's getting slower, he's getting slower. Number one, even if he is getting slower, that's inevitable as people get older, and it doesn't matter because they still can't catch him. But number two, even when you watch him run, he's barely trying and nobody can catch him. He's barely trying, and he's still going 20 miles per hour. Like, come on. Another reason why Lamar deserves MVP this year, and it's completely set in stone at this point, is because unlike a lot of other QBs and non QBs who are candidates, Lamar has showed up in the big games against all the best teams in the league. All these other players had a chance to outplay Lamar. They couldn't do it. Earlier in the year, people were arguing, hey, should Jared Goff be MVP? He went head to head against Lamar's defense, and Lamar went head to head against his defense. They dueled each other. Lamar smoked them. People were saying that super early in the year, they were saying that, yeah, man, Joe Burrow, he's gonna turn the season around and do this and that. Listen, with or without Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson owns the Bengals. That wasn't even a question. He outplayed them. Whoever it was, whether it was Joe Burrow or Jake Browning, it didn't matter. Just 2 weeks ago on Christmas, Lamar Jackson went head to head against a guy in Brock Purdy who people are hyping up to be like some game changing future Hall of Fame MVP quarterback. And what happened? They both played elite defenses, and Brock Purdy was terrible. He collapsed. Whereas Lamar Jackson did what he always do, which is take over the game and be the best player on the field. Colin Cowherd said it best. Lamar Jackson, just in the 49ers game alone, he was on the field with at least anywhere from 5 to 10 people who could be future Hall of Famers, and he was the best person on the field, without a shadow of a doubt. Also, another major milestone that happened this year that should matter is Lamar Jackson became the fourth fastest quarterback to win 50 games. The only quarterbacks in NFL history to win 50 games faster than Lamar Jackson are Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and Roger Staubach. Would that not matter towards why he's the MVP? Does that not matter? And furthermore, Lamar is engineering a top five offense in the NFL. Right now, the Ravens are second in the NFL in points per game at 29.6. Despite changing coordinators, and despite him having a career high in passing yards and also playing his most efficient football, despite us dropping passes early in the year, he's still accomplishing all this, and we're still first in the NFL in rushing. So all the things that Lamar has done this year, he's done it while being in the middle of learning a brand new offense on the fly. And all of this adds up to when people think about what is or what isn't an MVP. The problem, I might have to take this next statement and make it like a YouTube short or something. The problem, which is with a lot of people and why they don't understand why Lamar's MVP, because most people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. If I hand somebody a t-shirt with a price tag that says it's $10,000, they're gonna walk around with a sense of pride like you wouldn't believe. They're gonna have their head in the sky thinking they're like the coolest thing walking, thinking that they're special because in their mind it's like, oh, I got this $10,000 t-shirt, and they're gonna start convincing themselves and trying to convince themselves as to why it's so valuable, and they're gonna keep pointing to the number and say, oh no, this thing is 10,000. This thing is 10,000. But then on the flip side, you could have somebody who made a t-shirt from scratch, used the best material possible, made a cool design, put their heart and soul into it, took years to properly fine tune whatever they needed to fine tune on that design, and they have the best shirt, period. But you'll still have many people who will argue for the $10,000 shirt just because it's $10,000. Because they're not focusing on the actual quality, and they're just focusing on numbers on a piece of paper. And that's what's happening with this whole stat conversation. You have a lot of people who don't watch Ravens games. You have a lot of people who don't like Lamar Jackson and they don't watch Ravens games. And you have a lot of people who don't think for themselves and don't do any research. So they'll just look at numbers on paper, more specifically the touchdowns, and say, "Hey, Lamar doesn't have this many touchdowns, so he doesn't deserve it." Even though when you watch him play and when you watch any of these games, it's clear as day he has complete control of the entire game. And that is extremely hard to do in a game like football. In a game like basketball, it's still hard, but it's relatively easy compared to what you'd have to do in football. In basketball, you get a chance to play offense, defense, get rebounds, get steals, make free throws, try to hustle to save a ball from going out of bounds. Like you actually can affect the whole game. In order to have the effect Lamar Jackson has while only playing offense, you have to be an all-time great player. And then the funny thing is, when you bring up numbers that are in Lamar's favor, all of a sudden, then they don't want to talk about it. If I told you right now that the only quarterback with a lower percentage of his passes intercepted than Lamar is Dak Prescott, you wouldn't believe me. You let all these other people tell it, they'll try to convince you that that Lamar is not an effective passer, that he's not protecting the ball, that he's turning the ball over and it's alarming. But meanwhile, Josh Allen has an interception percentage rate that's double Lamar Jackson. Most of these quarterbacks do. Again, like I said, the only quarterback whose interception percentage ratio is lower than Lamar is Dak. And guess what? Guess what? Even though Dak is great, he's having a good year. Overall, he's still not better than Lamar Jackson. But that was my point overall. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Do you think Lamar is the MVP? Do you think that they'll vote for him to be MVP? And how many MVPs do you think Lamar will win over the next 5 years?